Hello, everybody. I'm joined today by Dr. Virgil Wood, who I've had the pleasure of getting to know over the past several years as we've explored a whole range of issues related to the beloved community and beloved economy. Dr. Wood is a church leader, educator, and civil rights activist who has committed much of his life's work to the struggle for economic and spiritual development among the nation's most disadvantaged. He is an ordained Baptist minister and has served churches in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Virginia for over 50 years. For a decade of his life, he served with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as a member of his National Executive Board of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and coordinated the state of Virginia in the historic March on Washington back on April 28 in 1963. So Dr. Wood, thank you very much for joining me again today. And I'd like to begin our conversation by asking you to reflect a little on the current atmosphere and predicament of the nation and to think about what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would be saying if he were still alive and with us today.
Thank you so much, my dear friend, Dr. Ralph Hall. It's been a delight. The time we've spent months and years now, a few years, working together on the possibility around this whole thing that I think of as King's true legacy, the beloved community, growing the beloved economy. And I would believe that that idea may be what the world is hungry for right now, especially our country. There is a word from those who have lived the kinds of times we face today. And among those you and I both think of as beloved community ancestors. In the American big story, wherever the arc of the moral universe bends, there is usually the influence of an Abraham Lincoln and a Frederick Douglass. In other words, there's usually a black and a white hand on the scale, so to speak, together. Martin Luther King and Abraham Heschel, Daddy King and George Wallace. I think that's a story worth sharing here. People know the role of George Wallace in America, but they don't know the whole story. They know the first George Wallace. They know the second George Wallace. The first George Wallace was a true populist. He was concerned about poor folks. He ran for public office and lost. And he announced that he had been out-niggered and he would not be out-niggered again. He ran, and that's the George Wallace that everybody knows. After the bullet, after his run for president of the United States, after the wheelchair, George Wallace had a visit from Daddy King, Martin King's father, who wanted to say hello to the governor, and knowing that he was in distress now in the wheelchair and having survived the bullet, went to see him and said, "Mr. Governor, I've come to see you. I don't know how you feel about me, but you are my brother. I've come to see you. I want to pray for you and let you know I love you." Essentially, that was the essence of it. Subsequent to that, George Wallace asked Dexter Avenue Church, which had been the church that young King had served in the Montgomery movement time. He asked the people there if they would allow him to come and say something, have a few minutes. They granted him that opportunity. He was rolled in the wheelchair, turned to face the audience, and he said something like this: "Thank you for letting me come here today. This is awfully good of you all to do this. You know my story, segregation, racism. I was a racist, I was a segregationist. It's all wrong," he said. He said, "I caused you all and a lot of people a lot of suffering. I now know what suffering is." He said, "I hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive me." That was all he said. "I hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive me." One of the most sincere pleas I've ever heard. He left it up to the people. As his handlers turned to wheel him out of the congregation, the old people reached out from the pews to shake his hand. And the deacon over in the corner started singing, "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound." I like to think that this is what Daddy King did. He issued George Wallace a ticket to heaven. But isn't it interesting that you never hear anyone talk about John Lewis and George Wallace, or John Lewis and Trent Lott? They're all part of that beloved community, new circle that will help us to shape the new America.